Hello everybody, this is Hero, back with another Dragonflight video, and we are checking out 10.1 PTR Enhanced Shaman. And in the background here I have some footage of some weird single target Gamba builds that I've been doing. This is where we're taking Thorums, and we're trying our best to hit Stormstrike as much as possible in single target. And I'm just testing it out with the new tier set to see what's going on. Two main things I want to cover. First of all, the weirdness of Chain Lightning for the Gamba build coming up next tier, and also the options that are available within a single target profile for the physical build. Now, the weirdness I'm talking about is that we're getting a 100% damage amp to Chain Lightning every time we press Sundering with our 4-piece. This essentially means, and you can see on the Chain Lightning damage in this footage is pretty high. It essentially means that when we press Sundering, we want to spend 2 charges on Chain Lightning since we're getting a huge damage amp to it. But for the Gamba build, where you're trying to hit Stormstrike as much as possible to proc Ascendance, this is a little problematic because it will copy and still do Chain Lightnings after you've done Sundering. So at some point you have to press Lightning Bolt to switch it back over. And unfortunately, this has happened a number of times in my testing. You'll press Sundering, you'll be firing off those Chain Lightnings, and your next Stormstrike will produce the Ascendance proc through DRE, and you'll want to press Stormstrike again, but you're casting Chain Lightnings. So there is enough kind of cleave in the raid, by the way, that this won't be a problem for every single boss, but it is a slightly annoying thing to have to reset by pressing Lightning Bolt, maybe sometimes even within your Ascendance proc. I'm not actually sure if that's the best way to play it. I don't know. It might not be. It might be if you get your Ascendance proc off a Stormstrike right after Sundering is done, it's probably just best to keep pressing Stormstrike even though you're launching Chain Lightnings. But you can see the problem here of having to juggle that back and forth, and I just wanted to note that for all of the builds that are doing physical stuff, on the single target side it's a little awkward. It gets even more awkward though if we're also trying to incorporate either Lava Burst or Ele Blast in our build, and you can see here I'm testing a Lava Burst build, which sounds a little weird, but let me tell you, once you've pressed Sundering, the damage amp you get to physical and fire makes Lava Burst hit like a complete bus. And here's one thing that's interesting about Lava Burst, and has always interested me since we got the new Flurry talent back in Dragonflight. Lava Burst, because of Flame Shock, always crits. So in all of my testing here on the dummies, and this is like 418 gear, I don't know, 25% haste, something like that, your Flurry uptime with Lava Burst casts is close to 100%. It was at like 98% for most of my testing when I've avoided pressing Elemental Blast and I have taken Lava Burst. So I'm not spending on Lightning Bolt as a filler. I'm spending, if I can, on Lava Burst. It brings your Flurry uptime to about 95 to 98%. If I'm not doing that, if I'm doing Elemental Blast, or if I'm just doing Lightning Bolt, the filler can be anywhere between 75 to 85%. Sometimes it's a little higher. What that means is that Flurry uptime, which is giving you sped up auto attack, which can then proc all of the things you want, like Wind Fury attack especially, that goes up if you use Lava Burst in a single target setting. Am I suggesting this, by the way? I'm not suggesting it, I'm just showing you what my testing has revealed. So don't freak out and get all mad at me for saying I said Lava Burst is the only way to go. No, I'm here to test out weird builds so that you can see what the interactions are. One of the things that it reveals actually is the nature of the GCD lockage for the physical build in single target. If you use Elemental Blast and you get the other charge of it by using Lava Burst on the class side, so you have 2 charges, you smooth out your gameplay noticeably, especially since, as you just saw it go off there, you have to use these Chain Lightnings to do huge burst damage within your Sundering window. It makes the gameplay a little bit more constrained. And I mean, look, this is nothing new for Enhanced Shaman. We've always had constrained gameplay. That means that you want to press multiple buttons that are good buttons to press, but you don't have the GCDs for it, so you have to make a choice. So even in the physical build where we're trying to press Stormstrike as much as possible, most of these builds have these weird flex points where you either are spending 10 of your Maelstrom and you're casting it on a Lava Burst, but then you have a bit of a drought, or you have 2 elemental blast charges and it's sort of smoothing things out, but you run into this barrier of also having to spend 2 GCDs on chain lightning. All of this stuff matters in the terms of the cadence of the gameplay. But Lava Burst is doing a lot of solid work. And one thing I tested out actually was moving away from the talent that gives an extra 5 points, the Overflowing Maelstrom talent, which allows you to spend 10 in one go. That actually smooths the gameplay out considerably because of the CD on Lava Burst. So Lava Burst is an 8-second CD. Elemental Blast is a 12-second CD. And what that means is if you only have the one charge of Elemental Blast, it's a 12-second cooldown, a little bit longer before you get back to it. If you have the double Lava Burst and Elemental Blast, you have the 2 charges that you have to use up, so you basically never cast Lightning Bolt naturally, only through Ascendance procs. But with Lava Burst having a low CD at 8 seconds, you're casting it very frequently. And if you have to wait until the 10 charge moment, your casts of Lightning Bolt itself naturally go way down. And you can see here in this demonstration, this is the 10-point piece. Lava Burst is sitting at something like 15 to 17% of my damage overall. Lightning Bolt is way down there at 5 or 6%, and most of those are cast from Ascendance procs. What this means is if you take Overflowing Maelstrom and spend at the 10-point marker, you create little drought pockets through your gameplay, in part because of the way that Legacy of the Frost Witch resets Storm Strike, so you have to be managing that and juggling that a little bit, but also the fact that you can't go back and forth between Spender and Builder, either your Storm Strike or your Ice Strike Builder with Swirling Maelstrom, or pressing Lava Lash. So it's this interesting problem of how do I set up my gameplay? Do I have enough haste so that I can get back to the 10-point threshold without running into GCD drought? Or do I need to smooth things out and have 5-point spenders all the way along so that I can just hit those markers easily and press Lava Burst for 5 and then press Storm Strike again and it gets me to 7 points. Then you press a Lightning Bolt because Lava Burst hasn't come back. Then you can Storm Strike again. This cadence that goes back and forth when you don't take Overflowing Maelstrom is quite reasonable. And it's not really a damage loss because you're still spending the spenders. You're just, instead of loading up your GCDs into this big moment of Elemental Blast or Lava Burst, you are spreading it out over a couple of moments and making sure the GCDs are consistent. So that's kind of one of the interesting takeaways for me about the Gamba build in general. And I'm not talking about top sims, I'm talking about gameplay experience, because there's one difference between, the sim says you must play double LE Blast, and I think Word Up did a really good video, by the way, on the different options for single target physical, for single target elementalist, and then vice versa for the AoE version. So if you want to check some of that out, it's great stuff. But it's also just taking up this problem of what's the ideal output buttons and not really considering where are the gameplay problems as I'm leveling up to get those options. So if you don't have great haste, if you are having a problem with GCD lockage, if the gameplay experience is going to be so awkward because you can't be in melee and you have to run. All these things are factors that I try to look at to talk about the nature of Enhanced Shaman. The final thing I'll say though is one of the cool things coming into 10.1 was a change that they made within the last couple weeks to the way that DRE procs for all 3 specs, and it's really relevant for the Gamba build. Essentially, they fixed the RNG so that every time you press Storm Strike, you have a greater chance to proc DRE than you did the last time you pressed it. It washes out at 0, so the first 2 Storm Strikes after it's reset don't give you that increased chance. They are a natural 7% or whatever the number is, but then you get an added or increased potential to proc DRE when you press Storm Strike. And this is an amazing change. It does mean that the valleys and the peaks are brought together a little bit more so that you're not having these exceptional moments where you get a DRE proc every single time you press Storm Strike in that Giga pull. But it does mean that you can expect each time you press Storm Strike to be closer and closer to pressing DRE, and therefore you can rely on it a lot more. This is especially significant in AoE, which is probably the worst place to play Gamba in the past tier, not because it didn't do some crazy damage sometimes, but because it felt really bad when you press Storm Strike, when there were 3 mobs left in the pack and you were moving on and you got your Ascendance proc, you just rolled your eyes and said, oh man. So at least this way, for both Mythic Plus content and especially for raids, you have a little bit more consistency and you can get that expectation. You are going to see really good haste numbers as we scale up in secondary stats. So I'm expecting a lot of people to actually play around and test the physical build, in part because it simplifies some of our priorities, especially in single target. Outside of course, the 4-piece shenanigans I was talking about with Chain Lightning, there are builds that you can do that even though they have a little bit of drought in them, meaning you're not going to always have a GCD to fill outside of burst windows, they still produce a lot of throughput and damage. And I'm excited to test it out and see where it can take us. I wanted to flag for you some of the exciting things coming to the physical build and talk about a little bit about the nuances in talent choices while obviously showcasing some gameplay in the background. But for those Enhancement Shaman gamers out there, it is the rise of the Gamba days. So you physical build guys who've been waiting to just smash things with Wind Fury attack, it's your time. So get in there. We'll see you guys again for the next one.